What happens when a beloved royal meets late-night television's most ruthless interrogator? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince Harry sits down with Stephen Colbert for what was supposed to be a routine promotional interview. The explosive confrontation that erupted last night has sent shockwaves through Hollywood and beyond, leaving viewers stunned and industry insiders questioning everything they thought they knew about professional broadcasting standards. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two powerhouses clash in the most dramatic late-night television moment in recent memory. The Ed Sullivan Theater buzzed with anticipation as Prince Harry made his entrance onto Stephen Colbert's stage, the audience erupting in warm applause for the Duke of Sussex. Dressed in a sharp navy suit, Harry appeared relaxed and confident as he waved to the crowd before taking his seat across from Colbert, who wore his trademark smirk that should have been the first warning sign of what was to come. "Welcome back to The Late Show. I'm Stephen Colbert," the host began with his usual theatrical flourish. "And tonight we have a very special guest who needs no introduction, but I'm going to give him one anyway, because that's literally my job. Please welcome Prince Harry, Duke of Sussex, author, humanitarian, and professional ex-royal." The audience chuckled at Colbert's pointed introduction, but Harry maintained his composure, offering a polite smile as he settled into the guest chair. "Thanks for having me, Stephen. Great to be here." "Oh, the pleasure is all mine, Your Highness," Colbert replied, his tone already carrying an edge that veteran viewers of the show would recognize as trouble brewing. "Or should I say, Your Former Highness? I'm never quite sure about the protocol now that you've, shall we say, stepped away from the family business." Harry's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Just Harry is fine, thanks." "Just Harry," Colbert repeated, drawing out the words with theatrical emphasis. "I love that. Very democratic. Very American, actually." "Speaking of America, you've really embraced the American dream, haven't you? Left the constraints of royal duty behind, signed those massive Netflix and Spotify deals, wrote the tell-all book. It's like the ultimate immigrant success story, except most immigrants don't trash their families on international television to get ahead." The studio audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the interview took an unexpectedly hostile turn within the first few minutes. Harry's jaw visibly tightened, but he maintained his diplomatic training. "I think that's a rather unfair characterization of my situation, Stephen." "Unfair?" Colbert leaned forward with predatory interest. "Help me understand what's fair, then. You had the most privileged upbringing imaginable, funded by British taxpayers, given every opportunity. And then when things got a little challenging, you decided to air the family's dirty laundry for profit. That seems pretty fair to me. Fair for you, anyway." The tension in the room was now palpable, with camera operators exchanging worried glances and producers frantically whispering into their headsets. Harry's media training was being put to the ultimate test as Colbert's attack became increasingly personal and aggressive. "Look, Stephen," Harry began, his voice still measured but with a steely undertone that hadn't been there moments before. "I came here tonight to discuss my charitable work and upcoming projects, not to be ambushed with tabloid talking points." But Colbert was just getting started, and what happened next would change everything. "Tabloid talking points?" Colbert's voice dripped with mock incredulity as he shuffled through his index cards with theatrical precision. "These aren't tabloid talking points, Harry. These are direct quotes from your own interviews. Let me refresh your memory." He held up a card and began reading in an exaggerated voice. Quote, "I felt trapped within the system like the rest of my family." End quote. "That was you on Oprah, wasn't it?" Harry's composure was beginning to crack as the host's relentless assault continued. "That interview was taken completely out of context, and you know it." "Out of context?" Colbert laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the increasingly uncomfortable studio. "The context was a 2-hour primetime special where you systematically dismantled your family's reputation, while sitting next to your wife in a carefully staged garden setting. What context am I missing exactly? The audience sat in stunned silence as what should have been a light-hearted late-night interview transformed into something resembling a hostile cross-examination. Harry's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles whitening as Colbert pressed his advantage. "And let's talk about your grandmother, shall we?" Colbert continued, his tone becoming even more venomous. "The Queen, God rest her soul, who dedicated her entire life to service, who maintained dignity even when her own grandson was selling family secrets to American media companies. How do you think she felt watching you cash in on the family name, while simultaneously destroying it?" This was the moment everything changed. Harry's diplomatic mask finally slipped completely, his eyes flashing with genuine anger as he leaned forward in his chair. "You have absolutely no right to speak about my grandmother that way. None whatsoever." "I have every right," Colbert shot back, his voice rising to match Harry's intensity. "This is America. We have something called free speech here. Maybe you haven't fully grasped that concept yet, coming from a country where criticizing the monarchy used to be treason." The studio erupted in gasps as crew members began to realize they were witnessing something unprecedented in late-night television history. Producers were frantically signaling from the wings, but Colbert seemed completely oblivious to their desperate attempts to rein him in. "You want to talk about free speech?" Harry's voice was now shaking with barely controlled fury. "Then let's talk about how you're using your platform to spread the same toxic narratives that drove my mother to her death. The same relentless pursuit, the same character assassination, the same complete disregard for basic human decency." The mention of Diana sent a visible shock through the studio. Even Colbert seemed momentarily taken aback by the raw emotion in Harry's voice, but he quickly regained his aggressive stance. "Don't you dare try to make yourself the victim here," Colbert snarled, pointing an accusatory finger across the desk. "Your mother was hounded by paparazzi, not by legitimate journalists asking legitimate questions about your hypocritical behavior. There's a difference, though I suspect you've conveniently forgotten that distinction in your quest for victimhood status." What happened next would be replayed countless times across social media and become the defining moment of both men's careers. Harry stood up abruptly from his chair, the sudden movement causing the studio lights to cast dramatic shadows across his face. His royal composure had completely evaporated, replaced by raw, unfiltered anger that sent shockwaves through the Ed Sullivan Theater. "You know what, Stephen?" Harry's voice cut through the stunned silence like a blade. "I've sat through enough of this character assassination masquerading as entertainment. You're not a journalist. You're a bully with a television show, and frankly, you're everything that's wrong with American media today." The audience gasped collectively as Colbert's face flushed red with indignation. He rose from behind his desk, abandoning any pretense of professional hosting. "Excuse me? I'm everything that's wrong with American media? That's rich coming from someone who sold out his own family for a Netflix payday. At least I didn't build my career on tearing people down for cheap laughs," Harry fired back, his accent becoming more pronounced as his anger intensified. "You hide behind comedy to justify your cruelty, but there's nothing funny about what you're doing here tonight." The confrontation had now moved beyond the confines of their chairs, with both men standing and facing each other across the desk like gladiators in an arena. Camera operators scrambled to capture every angle of the unprecedented meltdown, while audience members pulled out their phones despite strict no-recording policies. "Cruelty?" Colbert's laugh was bitter and mocking. "You want to know what cruelty is? Cruelty is watching your brother walk behind your mother's coffin while you plot your escape from responsibility. Cruelty is cashing in on family trauma while lecturing the rest of us about compassion and understanding." Harry's hands clenched into fists at his sides, his entire body trembling with barely contained rage. "How dare you bring up my mother's funeral? You have no idea what that day was like, what any of this has been like. You sit in your comfortable studio making jokes about things you couldn't possibly understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, Colbert shot back, his voice dripping with contempt. I understand that you're a privileged man-child who couldn't handle the pressure of being a working royal, so you threw a tantrum and moved to California to play victim for American audiences who eat up this kind of manufactured drama. The studio erupted in chaos as security personnel began moving toward the stage, sensing that the situation was spiraling completely out of control. Producers were frantically waving their arms, trying to signal for a commercial break, but both men were too locked in their heated exchange to notice. Manufactured drama? Harry's voice reached a crescendo that could be heard throughout the theater. My wife was driven to the point of contemplating suicide by the same kind of toxic coverage. You're perpetuating right now, but I suppose that's just good television to you, isn't it? Colbert's response was swift and merciless. Don't blame the media for your family's dysfunction, Harry. Every royal marriage has faced scrutiny. The difference is that previous generations handled it with dignity instead of running to American talk show hosts to air their grievances for money. The breaking point had finally arrived, and what Harry did next would shock everyone watching. Without warning, Harry swept his arm across Colbert's desk, sending the host's coffee mug, interview cards, and promotional materials crashing to the floor in a spectacular display of royal rage that no one in the studio could have anticipated. The sound of breaking ceramic echoed through the theater as stunned silence fell over the audience. Enough! Harry's voice boomed with an authority that reminded everyone present that despite everything, he was still a prince. I will not sit here and allow you to disrespect my wife, my mother's memory, and everything I've worked to build just so you can get your ratings boost for the week. Colbert stood frozen for a moment, clearly shaken by the physical outburst, but his ego wouldn't allow him to back down. If anything, Harry's dramatic gestures seemed to fuel his determination to finish what he had started. Well, there's the real Prince Harry, everyone, throwing tantrums when he doesn't get his way, just like a spoiled child who's never been told no in his entire privileged life. The audience was now completely silent, phones recording despite security attempts to stop them as they witnessed what would undoubtedly become one of the most infamous moments in late-night television history. Harry stepped closer to the desk, his face inches from Colbert's, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. You think this is about privilege? Harry's voice was low and dangerous now, more threatening than when he had been shouting. You want to know what privilege looks like, Stephen? It's having a platform like this and using it to destroy people's lives for entertainment. It's hiding behind jokes and comedy while you spread the same poison that killed my mother. Colbert's face contorted with indignation as he leaned forward to match Harry's aggressive posture. Don't you dare compare me to the paparazzi who chased your mother. I'm holding you accountable for your actions, something your family clearly never bothered to do. Accountable? Harry's laugh was hollow and bitter. You call this accountability? This is a public execution disguised as an interview. You invited me here under false pretenses, just so you could ambush me with this coordinated attack. The host's mask of professional composure had completely disappeared, replaced by raw animosity that shocked even his most loyal staff members. False pretenses? I told my producers exactly what this interview would be. Maybe your people should have done their homework before booking you on a show that actually asks hard questions instead of the softball interviews you're used to. Security guards were now positioned at the edges of the stage, ready to intervene if the confrontation turned physical, while producers desperately tried to signal for a commercial break that never came. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every explosive moment of what was rapidly becoming the most controversial interview in late-night history. Hard questions? Harry's voice cracked with emotion and rage. These aren't hard questions, Stephen. This is character assassination. This is exactly the kind of behavior that drove my wife and me away from public life in the first place. And you're proving every single point we've ever made about media toxicity." Colbert slammed his hand down on what remained of his desk setup, his own composure finally cracking completely. "Then why did you come back? Why did you write the book, do the interviews, sign the deals? You can't have it both ways, Harry. You can't profit from your royal connection while simultaneously playing the victim." The final straw was about to break, and what Harry said next would end his appearance in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. Harry's eyes blazed with a fury that seemed to draw upon centuries of royal authority as he delivered his final, devastating blow. "You know what the difference is between us, Stephen. When I left my role, I did it to protect my family and preserve my integrity. But you've built your entire career on being America's court jester, dancing for applause while tearing down anyone who threatens your fragile ego." The words hit Colbert like a physical blow, his face draining of color as the brutal truth of Harry's assessment sank in. But Harry wasn't finished. He stepped back from the desk, straightening his jacket with the practiced elegance of someone who had been trained from birth for moments exactly like this. "This interview ends now," Harry declared, his voice carrying the unmistakable tone of royal command. "I refuse to be part of whatever sick entertainment you think this is. You've shown your audience exactly who you really are tonight, Stephen, and it's not someone worthy of respect." Colbert, desperate to regain control of his own show, made one final, fatal mistake. "Running away again, Your Highness. Just like you ran from your duties, just like you ran from your family, just like you'll run from taking responsibility for anything in your entire privileged life." The theater fell into absolute silence as Harry slowly turned back to face his tormentor one last time. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried the weight of absolute finality. "My mother died fleeing from people exactly like you, Stephen. People who believed that destroying others was acceptable entertainment. Tonight, you've proven that her death taught you nothing. Absolutely nothing." With those words, Harry removed his microphone, placed it carefully on the guest chair, and began walking toward the exit. But Colbert, his ego completely consuming any remaining professionalism, couldn't let him leave without one final attack. "That's right, walk away, just like you walked away from everything else when it got too difficult," Colbert shouted after him, his voice echoing through the stunned theater. "This is what accountability looks like, Harry. This is what happens when someone finally calls you out for your hypocrisy." Harry paused at the edge of the stage, turning back one final time with a look of such profound disappointment that even the most hardened crew members felt uncomfortable. "No, Stephen. This is what happens when someone confuses cruelty with courage and bullying with journalism. I genuinely feel sorry for you." And with that, Prince Harry walked off the Late Show stage and out of the Ed Sullivan Theater, leaving behind a host whose reputation would never recover from the night he chose to attack a grieving son on national television. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within hours, clips of the confrontation had gone viral across every social media platform, with overwhelming public sentiment turning against Colbert. Sponsors began pulling their advertisements, CBS executives held emergency meetings, and entertainment industry insiders openly questioned whether the host had finally gone too far. Colbert's ratings plummeted in the following weeks as viewers abandoned the show in droves, disgusted by what they had witnessed. Industry peers who had once considered him a comedic genius now spoke of him in hushed, disappointed tones. The man who had built his career on holding others accountable had ultimately been held accountable himself by an audience that recognized the difference between legitimate criticism and cruel entertainment. The confrontation became a watershed moment in late-night television, sparking widespread discussions about the responsibility that comes with having a platform and the importance of maintaining basic human decency, even in the pursuit of compelling television. Harry's dignified exit had ultimately exposed Colbert's behavior for what it truly was, and the court of public opinion had rendered its verdict decisively.